This was the same thing that occurred with the printing press. What I mean by that is this. The first thing that people thought to show on movies after Thomas Edison had made that invention was pornography. It's the first thing they thought of. Right? First thing America thought, oh, we've got movable pictures and film. Let's make some porn. The Gutenberg press, which was invented in Europe, the first thing they printed, and they often don't tell you this in the history books, look up Gutenberg Bible and printing press if you get an opportunity. And the first thing they printed on a movable press in Europe was a pornographic text. Then they took that off the press, and then they printed the Bible right after that. That's when they printed the Gutenberg Bible. So they made a pornographic booklet, shoved that to the side, then printed the Bible. That was the second most widely printed book. First, we've got to get the porn out, because we can't let people miss that opportunity to have pornography. And so that same cyclical sickness has only been transferred across the Atlantic Ocean. The automobile was streamlined and innovated in 1304, while 1305 came with Coca-Cola being invented to offset alcohol use that was adversely affecting the U.S. work market. So in those years, the United States in 1305 realized at the rate that people are drinking alcohol, if this continues, it's going to cause a massive death of significant sections of our workforce. If all of those people die, who is there that's going to pay for the retirees? The people that get old, that need to retire with their pension that's paid for through the taxes of the Americans that are working. If they die off, there'll be no one to pay for the old people that have retired. That's the concern that they have right now. We've got all these old people that won't die, and young people that aren't working in enough numbers. So what are they doing? They're cracking down, they're cutting benefits, they're trying to force people, even that are certified handicapped, you're going to work. You're not crippled, but I've broken both of my legs and the femurs haven't properly healed. You're not hurt. Get back to work. To try to force them back into the workplace. It's not that they want to get people back in work and focused and feeling good about themselves. Don't believe that hype. They desperately want them to get back in there because why? Those people that are pushing hard, David Cameron's going to get old. Michael Howard's already old. Nick Clegg's going to get old. And what are they thinking? I need a pension over the next 20 years, and this is my meal ticket. They're pushing it now where, no, not 65, 73. Why? Well, because that extra vacation to the Philippines, that extra vacation to this other, we need you to pay for that. And so they started trying to discourage the use of alcohol recreationally, and they brought out Coca-Cola. And to make up for the fact that they were discouraging alcohol, they added coca, which we already mentioned that it had been discovered. They added coca, which is coming from the coca tree, which is where you get cocaine from. And they added a small portion of coca. And that small portion of coca that they had gave people that extra zip. And Coca-Cola caught on like a wildfire. And this is how Coca-Cola became so famous with its trademark bottle. 1308. There was a massive tragedy. This occurred at Wounded Knee. It was called the Massacre at Wounded Knee. There were a group of people who were Lakota natives who did the ghost dance, asked for better conditions, and also resisted colonial invasion of their lands. The Lakotas were rewarded with death. Now, the Lakota Nation, if you really want to understand about the U.S. policy, the Lakota Nation are the only nation that has not accepted the U.S. government, has never been defeated by the U.S. military, and does not pay tribute or taxes to the United States government on a national level. They do not recognize the United States. They call them a settler state. Sound familiar? Ask your friends, the Palestinians, because the Lakota feel the same way. The most outspoken voice of the Lakota today is a man by the name of Russell Means. And he was almost gunned down in the early 1970s. Their case became so prominent that Marlon Brando got involved and refused to accept the Oscar that he was presented in 1977 as a protest of what they were doing to the Lakota. They actually had one of the natives as a representative of Russell Means come up. This is 1977. She's got full side pigtails, moccasins, beautiful garb, but you see all of these upstanding, hardworking Americans in their best regalia and finery, and they go to present her with this carbuncle of a trophy of an Oscar, and she puts her hand out to block it. And she reads from about a 2-minute statement of why Marlon Brando didn't come and the plight of the people, to booing, hissing, shouting. You can probably YouTube it and find it. Booing, hissing, shouting, and then calmly and resolutely walks off stage. I don't need to tell you that the death threats that were received by this brave young girl were enormous. Not long after that, they brought together a film called Real Injun, which is Real is R-E-E-L, then Injun, I-N-J-U-N, which covered how natives or Aboriginal peoples in the U.S. are presented in Hollywood and the way forward from that. And it was a spectacularly done film. I mean, that's probably the best film ever done by natives about themselves. Very good, very well done film. So the Lakota had people among them that appeared that they would classify today as prophets. And these people said, if you should do this ghost dance and you repent for the sins of alcoholism, cutting your hair, taking in drugs, and fornication, if you should repent from those things, you will be victorious and the white man will disappear from your lands. Now these people are just dancing and asking for better conditions, better living conditions. They began to do this ghost dance. When white settlers, particularly the American government, found out what this meant, they sent troops down there to stop the dance and on pain of death to shoot them for doing the dance. So they got killed for dancing. And they slaughtered hundreds of them. A very good book that you could read on that topic would be called Bury Me at Wounded Knee, which is a very good document that deals with this annihilation process. In 1308, later in that year, halfway through the year, the Ku Klux Klan was invented. The language of Klanic was also later added to make it easy for them to speak among themselves. The Ku Klux Klan is coming from the word kuklos, which means circle of elders. And it started with perhaps 11 men, some legendary accounts state, and they invented a language called Klanic. Right? Ayuk, are you a Klansman? Akia, a Klansman I am. Right? And they had these code words and statements of language, an entire language. And they slowly filtered in and trickled into the police department in the United States. And to this day, a large section of the West Coast's LAPD, Oregon PD, Seattle PD, Denver PD, and other police departments pull either from the Southeast, which are Klansmen for their military roles, or from Klansmen that are in the North. So now you have decorated Ku Klux Klansmen in the police forces, and I want you to picture this. Men who have access to semi-automatic or single-fire double-barrel rifles who are Klansmen patrolling Black, Arab, Mexican, Puerto Rican neighborhoods. Obviously, there's going to be a few issues. There may be some incidents, and this is perhaps the most serious reason that led to some of the conditions we're going to later discuss. They produced a film called Birth of an Empire. Some people call it Birth of a Nation, which was actually a recruitment film for the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. Their membership rolls absolutely soared when people saw this film. It was like Nazi membership when people saw the film Triumph of the Will. People saw it, they were inspired. As I said, every American has a bit of Klansman in him. They saw it, they were absolutely amazed. They wanted to join the winning group, and they did so. The Klansmen grew in strength. Men bearing the white hoods of medieval inquisitors struck terror in the hearts of their victims and still do today. So when you see the Klansmen wearing the robes and the long hood with the slits for the eyes, that is actually, in the Spanish Inquisition, what the Spanish Catholic inquisitors used to dress in before they tortured their victims. And it's interesting because these people are torturing their victims, Americans, Christians. The other ones are torturing their victims, Spanish, Christians. But the clothes are the same. The attitude is the same. The theology has not changed. The rise of European liberalism began in 1312. All right? European liberalism is what we now are calling democracy. But the phrase that back then was liberalism. That we need to go and free people, introduce them to the principles of liberty, justice, wearing white stockings, powdered wigs, gonorrhea, syphilis. We need to bring this freedom to this wide swath of people who are missing out on eating large-scale selections of fatty beef every day. Cuts of potato the size of your finger. These people are missing out. We're going to show them by teaching them the principles of fried food and heart disease and coronary and heart attacks. And so this is what happened as they spread their diet. And people that didn't want to accept the democratic values or the European liberal values were exterminated. And they happened to start a war with the wrong people, which were a tribe called the Dahomey in what's today's Benin in Africa. It started a 12-year extermination program to try to annihilate the Dahomey. But the Dahomey were hanging strong, not giving up, able to outmaneuver Europeans, able to use their skill. Some of them had learned French to learn reconnaissance about the enemy, that they were using the Julian calendar rather than the Gregorian calendar, and what their troop movements were, what holidays they had, where they were. And they held off French imperialism for a period of time. Out of these battles was born the country of Benin. That country survives today. The Benin people have a proud history, and they're very forthright with it. Now, in covering the section of time between 1321 and 1337, between 1330 and 1331, the great game had begun as precipitated by Sir Mark Sykes. The idea by Sir Mark Sykes was to destroy the Ottoman Empire and divide it up, just like how the Berlin Conference had divided up the continent of Africa. Just as a side note, he later died in excruciating pain from anthrax poisoning. It's one of the few cases of natural anthrax poisoning. Don't know how he got it. Don't know how he died so horrifically and suffered. They weren't able to treat it, but he died horrifically in a lot of pain. The game was to divide and destroy the Ottomans and split the lands among the Frankish powers. This was done firstly by slowly demolishing the courts of the revealed law, the Mahakim al-Shar'iyya, the places where people judge by the revealed law. This person receives this much zakah, this person has to be executed. They began by undermining the importance of those, not just in practice, but undermining them in the minds of people. You need to have a Napoleonic law code, like in Egypt. Egypt to this day, from 1798 up until now, is still, for the most part, under the Napoleonic law code. Napoleon's been dead since Lord knows how long, but they're still running Egypt according to the Napoleonic law code. And they will say that Sharia is a source of legislation, but not the sole source, because there may be certain things that maybe aren't in the Sharia that aren't accounted for. And these are actual legal people that have been to university. They've got the jumped up scraps of paper with the embossed signatures, and they really believe that they're smart. They've studied the Kafir laws until they're blue in the face and stayed up at night and lost their vision because of it. And they really believe that the Sharia can't hold some of today's legislation and issues. So they prefer to use these laws. And that is part of how they began to denigrate the revealed law. So the courts, they divided them into two wings, one secular and one for the revealed law. So they made up this idea of what's called a secular court.